Thanksgiving at my parents' house in Indiana always looked perfect from the outside. The kind of postcard holiday scene strangers would admire without knowing a single thing about what happened behind closed doors. Cars lined the driveway, porch lights glowed warm through the falling dusk, and inside the house, the smell of roasted turkey cinnamon rolls and spiced cider drifted through every room. Children laughed. Aunts compared recipes. My father adjusted the thermostat twice because he insisted the house had to be exactly the right temperature. My mother floated between guests with a practiced smile, greeting everyone by name while pointedly ignoring me. For a moment, if someone had only glanced at us, they would have thought we were the kind of family who cherished one another. I sat near the end of the long dining table, the seat they always left for me close enough to help, but far enough that no one could accuse me of taking up space. Candles flickered in polished glass holders. Silverware chimed softly. Everything looked calm, warm, normal. And then, in a single breath, it wasn't. The tension started quietly the way storms do, in the shift of a voice and the tightening of a jaw. I asked Ethan a simple question. It was not accusatory or loud or disrespectful. It was barely more than a whisper. "Ethan, have you had a chance to look at the payment schedule I sent you?" That was all. A line spoken in passing, but it was as if I had lit a match next to a leaking gas stove. Ethan froze with his fork in midair. His eyes hardened in a way that sent a chill across my skin. The chatter around us softened as if someone had turned a dimmer switch. A few relatives glanced our way, sensing something brewing. I kept my hands folded in my lap. I was careful. Always careful. But Ethan pushed his chair back with a force that scraped violently against the hardwood floor. Before I could ask what was wrong, he stood up, grabbed his entire dinner plate, and with a furious swing, smashed it into the side of my head. The crash exploded through the room. Ceramic shattered, food splattered. Pain shot through me so sharply that for a moment I thought someone had turned off the lights. My chair tipped, and I fell hard onto the floor. The hardwood was unforgiving beneath me. My vision blurred, then doubled. A loud ringing filled my ears. I tried to breathe, but it felt as if the world had folded in on itself. The shock stole every sense from me except pain. A few relatives jolted upward as if to help, but my father snapped, "Sit down." "She is always dramatic." His tone carried the weight of command, and like obedient soldiers, everyone lowered themselves back into their seats. No one questioned him. No one moved toward me. My mother did not kneel beside me or ask if I was hurt. She did not even flinch. She simply lifted her wine glass, took a slow sip, and said, "Get up, Rachel. You are just help here. Do not ruin dinner." Her voice was smooth, unbothered, as if addressing a household employee who had dropped a tray, not a daughter bleeding on the floor. Ethan sat down again without a word, wiped his hands on a napkin, and reached for another roll. He did not look at me. He did not apologize. It was as if hitting me was simply an inconvenience between bites of turkey. Around me, the room settled back into its rhythm. Forks scraped plates, glasses clinked. Laughter rose cautiously at first, then fully as though my fall had been nothing more than a brief interruption. I lay there, unable to lift my head, listening to the conversation resume about football games and sales at the mall. No one knelt beside me. No one asked if I could stand. No one checked the growing warmth of blood trickling behind my ear. I turned my head slightly and saw the shoes of my parents walking past me. They did not stop. They did not look down. They stepped around me the same way one steps around a rug crease or a misplaced bag on the floor. In that moment, something inside me split open. Not anger. Not yet. Something colder. Something clearer. A truth I had spent most of my life trying not to see settled deep in my chest. To them, I was not a daughter. I was not a sister. I was an accessory to their holiday image, a silent helper, the one who cleaned, supported, stayed quiet, and never asked for anything. A person they could step over without breaking stride. That night on that cold wooden floor, I finally understood. I was not family. I was staff. The drive to the emergency room felt longer than any road I had ever taken, even though the hospital was only 15 minutes from my parents' house. I held one hand against the side of my head where the plate had struck, feeling the slow, sticky warmth of blood mixed with gravy and mashed potatoes drying against my skin. Every bump in the road sent a new wave of pain through my skull, and every passing streetlight reminded me how easily I could have stayed on that floor with no one caring enough to check if I was still breathing. My vision danced at the edges, but I kept going. I did not call anyone. I did not text anyone. I drove silently with the car heater blowing on my trembling hands, wondering how in a room full of people who shared my blood, not one had asked if I was all right. When I reached the ER entrance, the automatic doors opened with a hiss that sounded strangely comforting, like I was stepping into a world where people might actually notice that I was hurt. A nurse at the desk glanced up and immediately stood when she saw the dried blood streaking down my neck. She brought me a wheelchair, even though I insisted I could walk. My legs wobbled the moment I tried to take a step, and she guided me into the chair without a word. The fluorescent lights inside made everything feel too bright, too sharp, too real. Once I was in an exam room, another nurse began cleaning the wound, and a doctor came in to check my pupils and ask a series of questions that made my throat tighten. Do you know what day it is? Did you lose consciousness? Do you feel nauseous? Did someone hit you? That last question lingered in the air like smoke. I opened my mouth, closed it, then opened it again, but the words would not come out. Admitting what happened felt impossible, humiliating, childish even. How does a grown woman say, "My brother smashed a plate into my head, and my parents told me to get up and stop being dramatic"? The doctor studied my expression, not pushing but not looking away either. After a moment, he said softly, "Someone hurt you. I know the signs. You can tell me when you are ready." His kindness made my eyes sting, and I looked down at my hands, suddenly aware of how tightly I had been gripping the edges of the exam table. He ordered a CT scan, and 2 technicians guided me through a long hallway where my footsteps echoed like accusations. When they slid me into the machine, the ceiling above me blurred. I had a concussion. Mild, they said. Nothing life-threatening. The nurse applied a small bandage, but it felt pointless. The wound on my head would heal faster than the wound inside my chest. She asked if I had someone who could drive me home. I laughed before I could stop myself, a short, sharp sound that startled even me. I told her I was fine. The truth was, I would rather crawl home than call anyone from that house. When she stepped out, my phone buzzed on the exam table. One message from my mother and another from Ethan. I stared at the glowing screen for a long moment before picking it up. My mother's text read, "You embarrassed us tonight." I held the phone tighter, feeling something inside me crack, not with surprise, but with recognition. This was who she was. This was who she had always been. Her next message came before I finished reading the first. "If you had not pushed him, none of this would have happened. Stop causing problems." I set the phone down, but it buzzed again almost immediately. Ethan this time. "Grow up. You asked for it." I stared at his words, my breath catching somewhere between disbelief and exhaustion. A small part of me had clung to the fantasy that once he sobered up from the anger he might feel remorse. That part of me shriveled as I read the message again and again. In that sterile room with its white walls and humming fluorescent lights, I felt very young and very old at the same time. I wondered how many times I had forgiven them for things that should never have been forgiven. How many times I had pretended their cruelty did not hurt. How many times I had believed I could earn their love by being useful enough. I rested my head back against the pillow, closing my eyes. The sting behind my eyelids built until tears slipped down the sides of my face. Not loud sobs, just quiet, leaking, the kind that happens when a person finally stops pretending they are fine. The nurse returned and asked gently, "Do you want us to call someone for you?" I shook my head. "There is no one." She hesitated as though she wanted to argue, then gave a small nod and handed me a discharge packet. When I walked out into the night air, the cold wind hit my bandaged temple and made me inhale sharply. For a moment, I stood still, staring at the parking lot, the streetlights glowing in small halos. I had come here alone. I was leaving alone. And yet, something inside me no longer felt as helpless as when I had first walked in. Somewhere beneath the aching humiliation, beneath the disappointment and the sting of betrayal, a small flame had begun to grow. The words echoed in my mind, soft but steady. No more. No more letting them hurt me. No more accepting the role they wrote for me. No more lying on cold floors waiting for someone to notice. I walked to my car with careful steps, holding the railing when my vision wavered. I sat behind the wheel, closed my eyes, and breathed in the cold air. My head throbbed, but my thoughts were suddenly sharply clear. No more. Driving home from the ER, I realized the pain in my head was not the only thing throbbing. Memories I had tried to bury for years began to rise uninvited and sharp, the way old injuries ache before a storm. By the time I reached my apartment, the past was sitting beside me like a passenger who had never really left. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and for the first time in a long time, I did not turn on the lights. I sat on the couch in the dark, the quiet settling around me like a truth I had avoided for most of my life. Being treated like the help did not start tonight. It started decades before in that same Indiana house that had looked so warm and welcoming from the outside. I remembered being 8 years old, standing on a stool at the kitchen sink after Thanksgiving dinner while the rest of the kids watched movies in the living room. My mother handed me a stack of plates taller than my head and said, "Be useful, Rachel." Ethan sat on the couch with a bowl of ice cream while my father ruffled his hair and told him he was the pride of the family. I looked toward them as I scrubbed dried gravy off the dishes, wondering what I had done wrong. Why usefulness was the only type of love I ever seemed to earn. It continued every holiday, every birthday, every family reunion. When relatives came over, I was the one asked to set the table. Refill drinks, take jackets, clean spills, and carry trays. Always me, never Ethan. People praised him for things he barely did. They thanked him for helping even when he had done nothing except show up. Meanwhile, if I sat for even a moment, my mother's voice would cut through the room, reminding me to get up and make myself helpful, as if sitting were a luxury I did not deserve. I remembered the summer I turned 13 when my cousins stayed with us for a week. My father told everyone to relax and enjoy the break before school started again. Everyone but me. He handed me a list of chores that filled an entire page written in the neat block letters he used for grocery lists and mortgage checks. I scrubbed floors while the others played outside. I folded laundry while they swam at the community pool. I packed their lunches, but no one packed mine. I thought it was normal. I thought this was what being the youngest meant. I did not know then that in a healthy family, love is not earned through labor. When I was 15, I overheard my mother talking to a neighbor. She said Ethan is going places. Rachel is sweet, but she is better suited for helping people than leading. It was the first time I realized the hierarchy in our family was not accidental. It was a structure they had built intentionally. Ethan was the golden child, the one whose mistakes were forgiven before they were even acknowledged. I was the scapegoat, the quiet shadow expected to carry the weight of the household without asking why. Once in high school, I made the honor roll and brought home a certificate. I handed it to my mother at the dinner table. She skimmed it and said, "That is nice, honey, but Ethan needs help studying for his math exam. Can you tutor him tonight?" Ethan never thanked me for helping him pass that exam. My parents thanked him for trying. When I turned 18, I got a job as a waitress because college was out of reach. I assumed I had simply failed to plan well or to save enough. Years later, I would learn the truth, but back then, I blamed myself for everything. Ethan, meanwhile, received a brand new laptop, a car bought in cash, and a speech from my father about how the world was waiting for him. I paid rent. He partied. I worked double shifts. He slept in. I learned to stretch groceries for a week. He learned to ask for more. Yet even then, I still sought their approval. I still hoped for the day my parents would look at me with the same pride they reserved exclusively for him. That day never came. Instead, I became their default problem solver. When Ethan wrecked his first car, I was the one who picked him up from the side of the road. When he forgot to pay a bill, I was the one who covered it. When he failed a semester, I was the one who helped him draft an email to his academic advisor. Every time I helped him, my mother would say, "You are such a good sister, Rachel." Then she would turn to Ethan and say, "She is lucky to have you." Lucky. That word echoed painfully now as I sat in my dark apartment remembering all the years I had earned nothing but instructions and obligations. Even adulthood did not change anything. Whenever I visited home, my mother would hand me kitchen towels the moment I walked through the door. "Sit down, Ethan," she would say. "Rachel will help me in the kitchen." One Christmas, my cousin pulled me aside and whispered, "Why do they treat you like the maid?" I laughed it off, embarrassed, but inside, something small and tired curled in on itself. I had spent my entire life trying not to see what everyone else could. Tonight, lying on the floor of my parents' dining room with gravy drying on my skin and laughter floating above me was simply the first time the truth was too loud to ignore. My parents did not see me as an equal. They never had. My brother did not see me as a sister. He never did. I was the helper, the fixer, the one who absorbed the blows so the family image stayed intact. The Thanksgiving plate to the head was not an isolated act of violence. It was the physical expression of a lifetime of being told my worth depended on what I could do for them. Sitting alone in the dark, now my head throbbing, I finally admitted a truth I had been terrified to face. That Thanksgiving was not the first time they stepped over me. It was simply the first time I could not get up afterward. When I woke the next morning, the ache in my skull pulsed like a warning beacon, but it was not pain that pushed me out of bed. It was something sharper and steadier, something that had taken root inside me last night as I lay on the hardwood floor of my parents' dining room listening to them laugh while I bled. I moved slowly, testing the steadiness of my legs, then walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. My hands still trembled, but not from fear anymore. From clarity. For the first time in my life, I was seeing my family without the fog of hope blurring the edges. And in that sudden clarity, a memory surfaced. A drawer, a folder, a signature, a debt that had never been repaid. I set the glass down and walked to my home office. The room was small and plain, nothing extravagant, but it was mine. Unlike everything I had done for my family, everything inside this room existed because I earned it. I knelt beside the filing cabinet in the corner, the one I rarely opened because it held documents tied to the part of my life no one ever asked about. Not my job, not my accomplishments, and certainly not the sacrifices I had made to save my brother from consequences he fully deserved. I unlocked the bottom drawer. The metal clicked open with a weighty familiarity. Inside were folders arranged neatly, each one labeled in my handwriting. Taxes, insurance, work forms, loan documents. My heartbeat quickened as I reached for the one labeled Ethan. The tab had faded slightly from the years, but everything inside was preserved exactly as it had been the day he signed. I pulled the folder out and carried it to my desk. My fingers hesitated for a moment before opening it as though I already knew the power resting inside, but needed a breath to steady myself before confronting it. Then I spread the documents across the desk. Promissory note, deed, loan agreement, pages of signatures and clauses and obligations Ethan had once agreed to because he had no other choice. 3 years ago, when his business collapsed and he nearly lost his home, he had called me with a voice full of panic and desperation. "Rachel, please. I cannot lose the house." The bank rejected him. His credit score was unsalvageable. He owed more than he earned. I remembered sitting at this same desk with him across from me, watching him shift nervously as I explained what I was offering. "I buy the house outright. You pay me through a private mortgage. You keep your home. You keep your dignity." It was the most generous solution anyone could have given him, but Ethan did not see generosity. He saw rescue. He saw entitlement validated. He saw his sister doing what she always did, stepping in to fix his mistakes. He signed the papers without reading most of them. I remembered reminding him that the loan included an acceleration clause, that if he missed payments by more than 30 days, I could call the entire remaining balance due. He brushed it off, then laughing, saying, "You know I will pay you. You are my sister." He had already missed 2 months before tonight, 62 days late. I had sent reminders. Gentle ones at first, then firmer ones. He ignored all of them, because in his mind and in the minds of my parents, I existed to clean up their messes, soften their consequences, and swallow their insults. The Thanksgiving assault was not an isolated moment of rage. It was an extension of his belief that he could do anything to me without consequence. But the documents in front of me said otherwise. Reading them now felt like reading my way out of a cage I had never acknowledged I was in. Every clause, every signature, every overdue payment, all of it reminded me of a truth I had been too conditioned to use. I had power, real, legal, undeniable power, not emotional leverage, not moral high ground, actual authority backed by law. I flipped to the payment ledger and stared at the red numbers marking his missed payments. I traced the dates with my finger, feeling something cold and steady strengthen inside me. He hit the wrong person, I murmured to the empty room. I am his landlord. The words settled through me like a second heartbeat. When he smashed that plate into my head, when he watched me fall, when my parents told me to get up because I was just the help none of them imagined that I held control over the roof above his head. They saw me as powerless because they needed me to be powerless, because without someone to step on their hierarchy collapsed. But these papers told a different story. These papers said that Ethan was not just my brother. He was my borrower, my debtor, my legal responsibility, and my legal right. They said that I had been carrying him long before last night, that I had been holding up a structure that had always been built to crush me, that I had willingly allowed them to treat me like the help even when the truth was that I had been holding the financial foundations of the family together. I leaned back in my chair and breathed slowly. The throbbing in my head felt distant now, overshadowed by the rising fire in my chest. No more. No more being their servant. No more absorbing their cruelty in silence. No more believing that kindness meant accepting mistreatment. No more giving without boundaries. No more letting them define who I was. I gathered the documents into a clean stack and placed them back into the folder, but this time when I closed the drawer, it was not with the quiet resignation of someone trying to keep peace. It was with the deliberate finality of someone who had decided to reclaim her life. They had shown me exactly who they were last night. Now I would show them who I was. The morning light barely crept through my blinds when I sat back at my desk, the folder still warm from where my hands had held it through half the night. My head still throbbed from the impact of the Thanksgiving plate, but beneath the ache there was a steadiness I had never felt before. Not anger, not panic. Something quieter, clearer. Resolve. I opened my laptop and hovered my fingers above the keyboard. Calling Ethan would change nothing. Calling my parents would invite another round of gaslighting, but calling Miriam, my attorney, would change everything. I dialed her number and waited as the ringing echoed through my quiet apartment. She answered on the third ring, her voice sharp with early morning alertness. "Rachel, are you all right?" "You never call this early." I swallowed, trying to steady my voice. "I need to initiate a notice of default and accelerate a private mortgage." There was a beat of silence before she said Ethan. "Yes. Is everything okay?" I hesitated not because I doubted my choice, but because revisiting last night felt like reopening a wound that had barely scabbed. He assaulted me at Thanksgiving. I ended up in the ER. Another pause. This one heavier. Then her voice softened. "Rachel, I am so sorry. Do you want to file charges?" "No." My voice cracked slightly, surprising me. "This is not about retaliation. This is about boundaries. He has not paid in more than 60 days. The contract is clear. I want to move forward legally." Her tone shifted into professional precision, the mode I trusted most. "All right. I will prepare the documents. Notice of default acceleration clause activation payment demand, and if necessary, eviction proceedings." "Are you certain about this?" I closed my eyes. Certain. After we hung up, I sat still for a moment, breathing in the unfamiliar feeling of choosing myself instead of choosing peace by sacrificing myself. It felt strange at first. Then necessary. By the time I finished a cup of coffee, Miriam had already emailed drafts of the documents. She always moved fast when she sensed urgency, and this time she must have heard something in my voice that pushed her into motion. I reviewed the forms line by line. The language was unemotional, factual, and final. Borrower has exceeded the permissible period for delinquency. The lender demands full repayment of the remaining balance owed within 10 days. Failure to do so will result in the commencement of foreclosure proceedings. My name appeared as lender, Ethan's as borrower. Seeing it printed on official documents hit me harder than any plate to the head. My family had never acknowledged the help I gave them, but the law acknowledged it without hesitation. Miriam called an hour later. A courier will deliver the notice to Ethan's home by sunrise. The county filing will be completed by noon. Payment demand within 10 days from delivery. Then she paused. Rachel, one more question. Yes. Are you doing this because you are hurt, or because it is time? I took a slow breath. Because it is time. Good. Then you are moving forward, and that is the only direction you owe yourself now. She hung up, and I sat staring at the documents as if they were maps leading me out of a place I had lived in far too long. Around 6:45, my phone began vibrating relentlessly on the table. First a call from Ethan, then another, then another. I let each one go to voicemail. By the fourth call, he switched to text messages. What the hell is this? My mortgage is in default. Your name is on everything. Tell me this is a mistake. I set the phone down and walked to the kitchen window. The morning sky was pale and empty, the world quiet except for the faint hum of cars in the distance. For once, I did not feel the urge to explain myself, to soothe, to fix. Instead, I let the phone buzz angrily on the table while I made breakfast. At 8:30, my mother called. When I did not answer, she left a voicemail filled with the brittle tone she used whenever she believed I had stepped outside the role she assigned me. What are you doing? You are embarrassing the family. This is between you and your brother. Do not involve the law. Be reasonable. At 9:15, my father tried. His voice held that practiced calm he used whenever he wanted to sound wise and fair, usually right before telling me why I was wrong. Rachel, families handle things privately. You do not sue family. I finally replied with a single text. Families do not smash plates into their daughters' heads. The typing bubble appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again, then nothing. I imagined my father sitting at his kitchen table struggling to form a response that would preserve the illusion of moral high ground he clung to so tightly. By 10, a courier had confirmed document delivery and the county clerk confirmed the filing was complete. Everything was now in motion. Legal, irreversible, real. I should have felt guilt, maybe even fear. Instead, I felt something closer to release. The weight I had carried for years, the burden of being the family's unpaid caretaker problem solver, emotional sponge, and convenient scapegoat, had begun to lift. Not all at once, but inch by inch, breath by breath. Around noon, Ethan called again, and this time I answered. His voice was frantic. Rachel, listen, I think there has been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, I said calmly. You are 62 days late. The loan contract is clear. I need full repayment in 10 days. He sputtered. You cannot do this. We are family. You do not treat family like this. A humorless laugh slipped from me before I could stop it. You treated me like family last night. Silence. Then anger. You think you can ruin me over one bad night. No, I said quietly. I think you ruined yourself through years of believing there would never be consequences. He inhaled sharply, but I did not give him time to respond. The documents stand. I ended the call. My hands shook not from fear, but from the realization that I had finally chosen myself. By the next morning, the storm I had unleashed was already rippling through the family, though no one dared call it what it was. My phone buzzed non-stop while I got ready for work, the screen lighting up with messages from relatives who had not spoken to me in months. Some pretended concern. Some demanded explanations. Some scolded me for being dramatic. I ignored all of them. But at 8:17, a message appeared from a number I almost did not recognize. It was from Lily, my cousin's daughter, a quiet teenager who always sat at the kids' table and avoided the family chaos whenever possible. Her text was hesitant, almost trembling through the screen. Aunt Rachel, I think you should see this. There was a link attached. I stared at it, my pulse quickening for reasons I could not explain. For years, I had felt unseen in that house unnoticed, unless someone needed something scrubbed or carried or fixed, but Lily had noticed something last night. I clicked the link. A video opened. Shaky at first, then steady as the camera adjusted. It was the dining room, my parents' house. Thanksgiving dinner. The recording came from a small motion-activated camera on the hutch, one I never knew existed. It captured everything. The moment I leaned toward Ethan to ask about the payment schedule, the instant his expression changed, the scrape of his chair, the way he stood with the plate in hand, and then the impact, the plate hitting my head, the force of it, the food flying, me falling. It was all there, clear, undeniable, no room for interpretation or excuses. And then, as if the universe wanted to underline every lie my family had told for years, the camera also captured what happened next. My father standing immediately not to help me but to command the room. "Sit down." She is always dramatic, my mother turning toward me with annoyance instead of concern. "Get up, Rachel. You are just help here. Do not ruin dinner." Ethan sitting down with not a flicker of remorse. The room full of relatives shifting uncomfortably but ultimately obeying the hierarchy they had accepted their entire lives. And me lying motionless on the floor while the holiday resumed around me. The camera had recorded all of it. I watched the entire video numb and shaking. The video ended and Lily's message followed. "I thought you might need it. I know what they said, but this is what happened." I replayed the moment where my mother said I was just help. The words echoed with new weight now that they were documented. Truth frozen in pixels. Proof of what I had spent my entire life trying to downplay or reinterpret. Suddenly, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Ethan. "We need to talk." I did not respond. Then my father. "Call me now." Then my mother. "You need to come over, immediately." I set the phone aside. They did not know yet that I had the video. They did not know their narrative was collapsing. They did not know their power was slipping. Around noon, Ethan showed up at my apartment unannounced, pounding on the door like the world owed him urgency. Rachel opened the door. "I know you got the notice. We need to fix this." His voice was frantic, but underneath it I heard something else. Fear. I opened the door only a crack. He tried to push his way in, but I held the door firmly. "What do you want? We can work something out." "Stop being unreasonable. Reconsider the demand. 10 days is impossible." The video flashed through my mind. The way he lifted that plate. The way he hit me. The way he sat down afterward like nothing had happened. I kept my voice steady. "You assaulted me. You have not paid your mortgage in more than 2 months. I am not reconsidering anything." He scoffed, anger flaring again. "You slipped. You are blowing this out of proportion." For a moment, I almost laughed. Not because any of this was funny, but because he truly believed I would allow him to rewrite reality again. I opened my phone and held the screen up just enough so he could see the thumbnail of the video, his face drained of color. "Where did you get that?" His voice cracked like glass under pressure. "It does not matter," I said quietly. "What matters is that it exists." He swallowed hard panic flickering in his eyes. "You cannot send that to anyone. You cannot show that. You cannot use that." It was the first time I had ever seen him look unsure of himself. The first time he seemed to recognize that I was no longer the version of me he could manipulate. I did not raise my voice. I did not threaten him. I simply met his eyes and said, "I will use whatever I need to protect myself." He stepped back from the door as if I had pushed him. His lips parted like he wanted to argue, but no words came. Finally, he managed, "You are going to destroy this family." I shook my head slowly. No. The family destroyed itself when it decided. I was the only one who did not matter. I closed the door. He did not knock again. After he left, I watched the video one more time. Not to relive the pain, but to reclaim the truth. For the first time, I saw myself not as the help, not as the scapegoat, not as the invisible one. I saw myself as someone who had been brutalized in plain sight, someone who had been dehumanized by the people who should have protected her, and someone who was finally standing up. The day after Ethan saw the video thumbnail, the tone of the family shifted with an abruptness that might have felt comical if it had not been so predictable. My phone, which had been buzzing with accusations and scolding only hours before, now filled with messages coded in artificial sweetness. Rachel, can we talk? Rachel, your father and I are worried. Rachel, misunderstandings happen in every family. None of them mentioned the foreclosure notice. None of them mentioned the video. They were circling, calculating, scrambling for a way to contain what they suddenly realized they could not control. By mid-afternoon, there was a knock on my apartment door. A soft, polite knock, nothing like Ethan's frantic pounding. I opened it a few inches and saw my parents standing there dressed as if they were attending a church potluck instead of facing the daughter they had abandoned on a cold dining room floor. My mother stepped forward immediately, her voice warm in the way a heat lamp is warm bright on the surface and cold underneath. Honey, can we come in? We want to clear the air. The shift in her tone was so abrupt, so insincere that I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat. I opened the door only because I wanted to hear them say whatever performance they had rehearsed. They walked inside, taking small, careful steps like they were entering a courtroom instead of my living room. My father cleared his throat, always the one who preferred to sound reasonable first before becoming cruel. We think things got out of hand last night. Tensions were high. Thanksgiving is stressful for everyone. I did not offer them seats. They sat anyway. My mother placed her purse neatly on her lap and folded her hands over it, the picture of maternal concern. Rachel, we know Ethan can be impulsive, but he feels terrible about what happened. He told us he already apologized. My eyebrows lifted. He had done no such thing. But in my mother's world, reality was always optional. My father nodded reassuringly as if signing off on a press statement. We all said things we did not mean. You took it the wrong way. You were upset. We understand. I stared at them. For years, I had let conversations like this crumble me, convince me that my memory was flawed, that their cruelty was kindness misunderstood. But this time, the truth sat beside me like a witness. I kept my voice calm. I did not say anything last night. I was unconscious. They exchanged a quick glance, the kind that carried entire silent conversations. My father exhaled slowly. The important thing is that we move forward. No reason to escalate or involve outside people. No reason to make this bigger than it is. There it was. The fear behind their sudden gentleness. The video, the foreclosure, the collapse of the narrative they had depended on for decades. My mother leaned forward, touching my knee the way she used to when she wanted something. Sweetheart, we love you. You know that. Families argue. Families forgive. Let us put this behind us. I removed her hand from my knee. Nothing about last night was an argument. Her smile flickered for a split second before she forced it back into place. You know how dramatic you can be. That plate did not hit you that hard. You scared everyone when you fell. And that hospital visit, maybe you overreacted. I almost laughed at the absurdity. I had a concussion. My father straightened up using his lecture voice. Rachel, listen. If you let this go, we can avoid embarrassment for everyone. You should not want the whole family to think you are trying to ruin Ethan's life. There it was, the bargaining phase of manipulation. They were not here to apologize. They were here to secure silence. Before I could respond, my mother stood abruptly, smoothing her blouse. You know, if you drop all this, we can pretend it never happened. The swallow in my throat felt like swallowing nails. I said, You want me to pretend he did not hit me? She waved her hand dismissively. Well, accidents happen. Besides, your cousin Angela already agreed that it looked like you slipped. I stared at her, stunned by how effortlessly she rewrote the truth. She did not know that her story was already crumbling in real time. She did not know I had watched the entire thing from a better angle than anyone in the room. Then her phone buzzed. She pulled it out casually, still speaking. Ethan says he is worried about you. He hopes you will be reasonable. She tapped the screen, then froze. Her eyes widened. A shade of panic crossed her face so quickly she almost hid it. But then her lips pressed together sharply, and I knew exactly what had happened. She had read her message preview. She quickly turned off her phone and stood gathering her purse. We should go. Before they reached the door, a notification lit up my own phone. A new message, from my mother, sent to me by mistake. She bought the act. Do not worry. We will say she slipped. My breath caught, not in surprise, In confirmation, every suspicion, every ache, every instinct I had ignored for years came into perfect focus. They had not come here to make peace. They had come to manipulate, to lie, to protect Ethan, to bury what happened. I lifted my gaze toward her slowly. You sent that to the wrong person. She turned toward me, color draining from her face. Rachel, wait. It is not what you think. My father stepped forward with a half-formed excuse, but I cut him off. You were not apologizing. You were strategizing. They stood there exposed. Their performance had crumbled. And the soft part of me that always tried to understand them, to believe the best in them, dissolved completely. My voice came out steady. Get out! My mother stiffened as if the word physically struck her. Rachel, be reasonable. I opened the door and pointed outward. Get out of my home. They walked past me slowly, stunned not by their guilt, but by the fact that I was no longer accepting my assigned role. When the door closed behind them, the silence felt different than it ever had before. It was not loneliness. It was liberation. They did not stay gone for long. Manipulators rarely do. They need to control the story shape. It protect themselves from the truth they fear more than consequences. So when my parents returned less than an hour later, pounding on my door with a frantic desperation, they tried to disguise as concern. I knew immediately that this confrontation was inevitable. I opened the door just enough to see their faces, both pale and strained, fear tightening their expressions. Not fear for me, fear for themselves. My father spoke first, his voice trembling even as he tried to sound authoritative. Rachel, open the door. We need to talk again. Now. My mother hovered behind him, clutching her purse like it was a life raft. Her voice wobbled when she said, Please, sweetheart, do not do this. Just let us explain. Something inside me steadied, a kind of clarity that made the noise of their panic fade into background static. I opened the door wider and stepped aside, not out of submission, but because I wanted them to see the truth without walls between us. They entered cautiously, glancing around my living room as if expecting witnesses. My father turned to me. His hands were slightly raised, palms open. The gesture was rehearsed. Rachel, what you saw on that text, it was a misunderstanding. You know how phones autocorrect. I almost laughed. Autocorrect does not turn compassion into calculated deceit. My mother shook her head violently. We were not conspiring. We were brainstorming how to address the situation. You misinterpreted it. Misinterpreted one of their favorite words. A word I had swallowed for years until it had become a blanket excuse for every cruelty they denied. I locked eyes with them, feeling no tremor in my voice. I saw the video. The words landed like a blow. My mother blinked rapidly, her breath catching in her throat. My father froze. Neither of them asked what video. They already knew. The silence that followed was the truest thing they had ever given me. I continued my tone, calm, steady, controlled. I saw exactly what happened, every second, every expression, every choice. And I saw both of you walk past me on the floor like I was something in the way, not someone you raised. My mother's lips trembled. Rachel, honey, you do not understand what it looked like from our angle. People panicked. It was confusing. My father nodded quickly, desperate to reframe the narrative. Yes, and we thought you slipped. You fell quickly. We did not know what happened. I picked up my phone, tapped once, and held the screen toward them so they could see the paused frame. Me on the floor. Ethan sitting down. My father towering over me. My mother looking at me with irritated contempt. My father swallowed hard. His voice cracked. You cannot show that to anyone. The shift in him was immediate and raw. Not regret, not remorse. Fear. Not fear of what he had done. Fear of consequences. My mother stepped forward, hands clasped tightly. Rachel, you have to delete it. Please. People will misunderstand. They will think we are bad parents. The irony stung. You worry more about what strangers will think than the fact that your son hit me so hard I could not stand. My mother's composure shattered. She raised her voice, desperate and shaking. We did not raise him to do that. We did not know he would. My eyes did not leave hers. You knew exactly who he was. You just never cared when he hurt me, only when it threatened to reflect badly on you. My father exhaled sharply, abandoning the gentle facade. Do not be dramatic. You are blowing this out of proportion. Plenty of families have arguments. Families do not call foreclosure notices. You could ruin his life. You will ruin your own reputation. The word dramatic hit me like a memory. Thanksgiving night, me on the floor, my father's voice slicing through the room. She is always dramatic. My chest tightened, then steadied. This is not about reputation. This is about what happened and what has been happening my entire life. My mother stepped closer, her voice softening into a tone she used only when she was losing control. Rachel, if you do this, you will break this family. I shook my head. You broke it. You broke it the moment you decided my pain was less important than his comfort. They stared at me like they were seeing a stranger. Good. Maybe they finally were. My father tried once more, grasping for authority he no longer had. Rachel, you need to drop everything. Immediately. The foreclosure, the anger, the accusations, all of it. Delete the video and we can move on. I felt something lift inside me, the last shred of the old version of myself peeling away. I said very quietly, no. My mother let out a sound between a gasp and a sob. Rachel, please listen. If you go through with this, Ethan could lose his home. His children could be uprooted. His marriage could be strained. And what about your role in all this? Do you really want people talking about you? I stepped closer to her. For years you told me I was the help. So I helped. I cleaned your messes. I carried your burdens. I swallowed your cruelty. But I am done. They looked stunned, as if the idea of me refusing them violated some natural law. The silence stretched long enough that the air felt heavy. Finally, my father whispered, "What do you want?" The question was not emotional. It was transactional. It always had been. I stood straighter. I want accountability. I want respect. And I want you to stop rewriting the truth. My mother shook her head helplessly. We did not rewrite anything. I held her gaze until she looked away. You did not just cover for him. You erased me. They stood silently, the weight of their unraveling settling across their shoulders. When they finally left, their faces were pale and defeated. But I felt no victory, only release. For the first time in my life, I was not the one breaking. I was the one refusing to bend. The day after the confrontation with my parents, my apartment felt strangely quiet, as if the walls were waiting for something inevitable. I knew Ethan would come. People like him do not accept consequences on paper. They come in person, desperate to shift the balance back to the version of reality where they remain untouchable. Still, when the knock came hard and uneven, I felt my breath hitch. Not from fear, from certainty. This moment had been building my entire life. I opened the door and found Ethan standing there, but not the Ethan I had grown up with. Not the smug golden child with too much confidence and too little accountability. This Ethan looked smaller, almost hollow. His hair was uncombed, his eyes bloodshot, his jaw tight from clenching. For a moment, he did not speak. He just stood there breathing heavily like he had sprinted to my apartment instead of driven. Rachel, please, he finally said. His voice cracked and unfamiliar. Can I come in? I stepped aside, watching him walk inside without the arrogance he usually carried like a second spine. He stood in the center of my living room, staring at his hands. I had never seen him this still, this shaken. He spoke without looking up. The bank called. Mom and Dad told me about the filing. His voice weakened. And the video. The video. The thing that had captured not only his violence, but the family's indifference. I waited, not offering him relief, not softening the moment. For once, silence belonged to me. He sank onto the edge of my couch like someone who had forgotten how to hold himself up. His hands covered his face as he whispered, I do not know what to do. I let the words settle. They were not an apology. They were fear, pretending to be vulnerability. When he finally lowered his hands, his eyes were wet with tears he did not bother to wipe away. Rachel, I am begging you. Please, I cannot lose the house. We do not have anywhere to go." My stomach twisted not from sympathy, but from the weight of how easily he expected me to save him again. I spoke calmly. "You should have thought about that before you stopped paying your mortgage." He flinched, as if the word mortgage itself was an accusation he could deny. Mortgage, the legal tie between us that stripped away the family dynamic and exposed him as a debtor, not a victim. He looked at me helplessly. I did not think it mattered. "You never enforced anything before." My voice stayed steady. "That was my mistake." He ran a trembling hand through his hair. "The kids. Think about the kids. They need stability. They need their home. Do you want them to suffer because of a stupid fight? A stupid fight!" I repeated the words slowly, letting them reveal how far removed he was from reality. "You hit me with a plate. You knocked me unconscious. You watched them step over me." He winced as if the memory struck him physically. "Rachel, I know I crossed a line. I did not mean to hurt you like that. It just happened." I felt a coldness settle inside me. Violence does not just happen. It is chosen. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Mom and Dad were already angry. They said you were stirring things up, and when you brought up the payment, I do not know." I snapped. I lost it. I heard in those words the confession of a lifetime, not just about Thanksgiving, but about every moment he had been allowed to lose control because someone else would always cushion the fall. I asked quietly, "Why did you think it was okay?" He looked up at me, then truly looked at me, and something in his eyes cracked open. "Because they always told me you were dramatic, overreactive, a burden." He swallowed hard. "They said you needed to be kept in line sometimes, that you made things hard for everyone." My chest tightened. This was not new pain. This was old pain finally speaking aloud. I whispered, "And you believed them?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, I did. I thought you deserved it." He broke then, shoulders shaking, face crumpling, the weight of decades finally pressing into him. But his collapse did not move me the way he expected it to. Sadness did not wash over me. Pity did not soften my resolve. Instead, his honesty gave me something else. Confirmation. For so long, I had thought I was imagining the dynamic in our family. Gaslighting is easy to fall for when it is all you have ever known. But now, Ethan himself had said the words out loud. Words that validated every wound I had carried quietly. He wiped his face and tried again. "Please, Rachel, I cannot come up with the full amount. You know that. Just cancel the notice, withdraw the demand, give me a chance." I sat across from him, calm, grounded, entirely done being his safety net. "No." The word hit him like another blow. "Rachel," he whispered desperately, "I am losing everything." "You are not losing everything I said. You are facing consequences. There is a difference." He shook his head in disbelief. "You are going to let your own brother fall apart. After everything I have done for you." The sentence lingered like smoke. Everything he had done for me. The convenience of selective memory. I looked him straight in the eye. "What exactly have you done for me?" He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again, but nothing came out. He had nothing to list, nothing to offer, nothing to balance the scale. For the first time in his life, he stood before me completely stripped of the story our parents had written for him. Not the golden child, not the hero, not the favorite. Just a man terrified of the consequences he had earned. I stood. "This conversation is over." He stood too shaky, desperate. "Rachel, please." I reached for the door and opened it. 10 days. That is all you have. He stepped into the hallway still pleading, but I closed the door gently. Not slammed, not angry. Firm. Final. On the other side of the door, I heard him exhale a broken sound. A sound that belonged to someone watching the world rearrange itself around new truths. Truths he could no longer control. For 2 days after Ethan left my apartment with 10 days hanging over his head like a countdown he could not escape, the family went eerily quiet. No calls, no messages, no surprise visits. It was the kind of silence that feels staged, as if everyone agreed to hold their breath at the same time. I knew exactly what it meant. They were regrouping, rewriting, strategizing. My parents had always treated family conflict like a public relations crisis, not an emotional one. They were not trying to understand what had happened. They were trying to figure out how to spin it. On the third morning, as I poured coffee into a mug I had owned since college, my phone buzzed with a name I did not expect. Ethan. This time it was not a call. It was a message. I need to see you. Please. No yelling. No threats. No excuses. Just a request. I stared at the screen for several seconds before responding. 1 hour. When he arrived, he did not come storming in or pounding on the door like before. He knocked once, softly, almost apologetically. I opened the door, not offering warmth, just space. He walked inside with a slow hesitance that made him look smaller than he ever had. He sat on the edge of the couch again, but this time he did not hide behind anger or theatrics. He looked worn out, crushed from the inside. His voice was rough. "Rachel, I cannot do this anymore." I waited, letting him speak at his own pace. "I am terrified. The house, the money, the kids. I am in over my head, and I know it." He swallowed hard. "This is my fault." I wanted him to understand what he had done, not only financially but emotionally. I waited again. He continued with a shaky exhale. "I do not deserve your forgiveness. I know that. But tell me what I can do. Tell me what you want." In the past, that question would have caught me off guard. I would have rushed to reassure, rushed to protect, rushed to put everyone else's comfort ahead of my own. But not now. The documents on my desk behind me were more than legal papers. They were boundary lines, lines I had never drawn before. It was time. I sat on the chair across from him, meeting his eyes without flinching. "Here are the terms." His shoulders tensed, bracing like a man awaiting a sentence. I continued calmly, clearly, without emotional decoration. "First, you will apologize to me, not in private, in front of the entire family at Christmas dinner." His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "Second, you will tell them exactly what you did, what happened at Thanksgiving, what you believed about me, and why it was wrong." He closed his eyes for a moment as if picturing it, and I could almost feel his shame pulsing across the room. "Third," I said, "you will correct every lie our parents have told about what happened, and you will not allow them to twist the story again. Not this time. Not ever." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "They are not going to like that." I kept my voice steady. "Their discomfort is not my responsibility." He nodded slowly, absorbing each word. "And fourth," I said, "the mortgage." This was the part he feared most, the part that had driven him to desperation. "You will continue paying every month, on time, without reminders, without excuses. If you are late, even one day, the foreclosure continues." I watched his throat tighten as he swallowed. "How much?" "All of it. The entire overdue amount. Spread over the remainder of your term." His eyes widened. "Rachel, that will raise my monthly payment." "Yes." "Actions have cost." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, shaking slightly. "And if I cannot keep up, then you lose the house." His face paled. He nodded slowly, not arguing, not fighting, just accepting. For the first time in our lives, he understood I meant every word. And finally, I said the most important term. "You will never call me the help again. Not as a joke, not in anger, not behind my back. Never." Ethan's eyes filled again, but this time he held the tears back as if he knew crying now would not help him. He whispered, "I never should have said that, or believed it." "No, you should not have." He took a long breath, steadying himself. "I will do it. All of it. I need to fix this." I nodded, not offering a smile or a softening gesture. Consequences did not need comfort. "Good. I will have Miriam draft the revised agreement." He stood slowly, like his body suddenly weighed twice as much. Before leaving, he paused at the doorway. He looked at me with something unfamiliar in his expression. "Respect." "I am sorry," he said quietly. I did not respond. Not yet. Apologies are not words. They are actions repeated until the damage begins to heal. When he left, I felt the quiet return to my apartment. But this time, it did not feel heavy. It felt clean. Christmas dinner was now set not as a holiday gathering, but as a reckoning. And for the first time, the terms belonged to me. Christmas at my parents' house had always been theatrical. Garland wrapped around every banister, flickering candles lined across the dining table wreaths on every window, and a giant tree overloaded with ornaments my mother insisted were heirlooms, even though most came from clearance bins. It was tradition cloaked in decoration, a performance of warmth more than warmth itself. That year, walking through the front door felt different. No one rushed to greet me. No forced hugs. No brittle smiles pretending nothing had happened. Instead, they paused, watching me, as if I were a witness rather than a participant. I hung my coat on the same hook I had used since childhood, the metal cold under my fingers, and stepped into the living room where everyone had gathered. The air was thick with tension, a quiet so heavy it made the soft Christmas music sound wrong. My father stood near the fireplace, hands clasped behind his back like a man preparing to give a speech. My mother clutched a glass of wine, her fingers tight, her eyes scanning me for signs of weakness. Ethan sat apart from them, shoulders hunched, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor as though he could fall through it and disappear. When he saw me enter, he stood. It was immediate, reflexive, respectful, or maybe terrified. Either way, it was new. Everyone watched us. I took a seat at the dining table, choosing the chair that had always been mine, though it had often felt borrowed. The room slowly filled with small movements, plates being set down, chairs pulled out. No one spoke until the last person sat. My mother attempted to start with her usual ritual, lifting her glass slightly. Before we begin, Ethan's voice cut through the room. I need to say something. The interruption was so uncharacteristic that several people flinched. My mother's jaw clenched, but she sat down without finishing her toast. Ethan remained standing at the head of the table. The head seat had always been reserved for our father, but no one corrected him this time. He took a long, trembling breath before speaking. I need to apologize, he said, looking around the table, but never letting his gaze land on me yet. His voice cracked slightly. Not just for what happened at Thanksgiving, though, that alone was awful enough, but for everything that came before it. A few relatives shifted in their seats. Others stared, unsure where this was heading. My father looked ready to intervene, but Ethan raised a hand, stopping him. No, I have to say this. Dad's mouth closed. Ethan finally turned toward me. Rachel, I hit you. I smashed a plate into your head. I hurt you. I humiliated you. And then I lied about it. I said you slipped. I let them believe it. I let them mock you. I let them call you dramatic. I let them treat you like a nuisance. He swallowed hard, eyes red. And the truth is, I believed what they said about you. I believed you were less. I believed you were someone I could step on. I believed you were someone who existed to clean up my messes. His voice broke, but he kept going. You saved my home. You bought it for me when no one else would. You saved us when I could not save myself. And I repaid you by treating you worse than a stranger. A silence spread across the room like a cold fog. My mother's lips tightened. My father looked away. Ethan reached into his pocket and placed a folded paper on the table. The revised loan agreement. I am signing it, he said. I am paying what I owe. Every month. On time. I will fix what I broke. The room grew even quieter. For a moment, I thought the apology was done, but he shook his head and forced himself to continue. And to all of you, he said, looking around the table, you let it happen. Every one of you. You watched her lying on the floor. You heard Mom say she was just help. You saw me walk away, and none of you stood up for her. He turned toward my parents. You told me my entire life that Rachel was dramatic, difficult, too sensitive. You trained me to see her as less so you would not have to see her pain. My mother's face went pale. My father's mouth pressed into a hard line. Ethan's voice steadied. You were wrong. You taught me something broken. You taught me to hurt her. He looked at me again. I am sorry. I am so sorry, Rachel. I do not expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I am not that person anymore. When he sat down, the room stayed utterly still. No breathing, no clinking, no shifting in chairs. Just the weight of truth finally filling a space that had been held together by denial for too long. I looked around the table. Aunts, uncles, cousins, people who had witnessed my entire life yet never truly seen me. Their expressions ranged from stunned to ashamed. And then I spoke. I appreciate your apology, Ethan, and I believe you mean it. But this is not just about that night. This is about years of being invisible, years of being useful instead of loved, years of being told I should be grateful for scraps of respect. I folded my hands. I am not here to destroy the family. I am here to stop being destroyed by it. My mother set her wine glass down so hard it clattered. "Rachel, you are being dramatic!" My father inhaled sharply, ready to support her. Ethan did something I had never seen before. He interrupted them. "No, she is not, and you are not going to talk to her like that ever again." My father froze. My mother blinked in disbelief. The air shifted, power moved, and for the first time it moved toward me. I rose from my seat, feeling the room change around me. I am done being stepped on. I am done being the help. And I am done pretending everything is fine when it is not. I walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. I am not asking for a new family. I am asking for a new way of being treated. If you cannot give that, then I will walk away for good. No one argued. No one laughed. No one dismissed me. They just watched me. Really watched me, maybe for the first time. As I reached for my coat, I heard Ethan whisper behind me, "Thank you for giving me a chance to be better." When I stepped outside into the cold night air, I realized the strangest thing. For the first time in my life, Christmas actually felt honest. In the days after Christmas dinner, something strange settled over my family, something I had never experienced before. It was not warmth. It was not reconciliation. It was awareness. Shaken awareness. The kind that comes only after a structure has cracked so loudly no one can pretend it is stable anymore. My phone, usually a place where criticism arrived, dressed as concern, began to light up with messages of a very different tone. My Aunt Patricia sent the first one. "I watched what happened at dinner, and I am sorry we never stepped in sooner. You deserved better." Then my cousin Daniel texted, "I always thought something was off in the way they treated you. I should have said something." Even my Uncle Robert wrote an awkward but genuine apology that ended with, "If you ever need anything, you call me kiddo." The irony was sharp. All of them had needed only one thing from me for decades: silence. Now they were offering support because I had finally taken mine away. But the biggest shift came from the place I least expected it: my parents' house. Not physically, but behaviorally. My mother, who had not apologized in her entire life, started texting me. At first, they were short, stiff attempts that read like messages she was forced to send by someone standing over her shoulder. "Can we talk? Let me know when you are free. We should clear the air." I did not respond. It was not punishment. It was protection. For once, I was choosing not to rush into their discomfort and make it easier for them. My father did not reach out directly, but I heard from Ethan that he had begun pacing the house at odd hours, muttering to himself. "He wants to fix it, but has no idea where to start," Ethan said. That made sense. Apologies require speaking honestly. My father's entire world had been built on carefully maintained illusions. Without them, he would have nothing to stand on. Ethan, on the other hand, had undergone a noticeable change. He called Miriam himself, asking questions, making sure he understood every legal requirement in the revised agreement. He paid the overdue amount on time. He paid the January installment 2 days early. When he spoke to me, his voice was steady, stripped of bravado or entitlement, not submissive, not afraid, just responsible. I realized something important in that change. The issue had never been that Ethan was incapable of being decent. It was that he had never been required to be. Christmas dinner had not just been a reckoning. It had been a reset, and everyone felt it. In the following weeks, family gatherings that once treated me like a background prop suddenly treated me like a central figure whose presence mattered. At a cousin's birthday party, someone handed me a plate instead of handing me a trash bag. My aunt asked for my opinion before finalizing the menu. It was almost absurd how quickly behavior changed once the illusion of hierarchy shattered. But the biggest shift came the next time I visited my parents' house. I had not planned to go. I was dropping off a gift for Ethan's kids, and he asked if I could swing by. When I walked inside, the atmosphere did not feel like home. It felt like neutral territory. My father, who normally stayed seated and made others approach him, stood up the moment he saw me. "Rachel." He said it like a greeting and a question at the same time. My mother hovered near the kitchen doorway, her face tight with uncertainty rather than disdain. They were both waiting for direction, waiting to know how to act now that the script they had followed for decades had been burned alive at Christmas dinner. My father cleared his throat, something he did when he needed to buy time but did not know how to fill it. "I want to acknowledge what happened," he said slowly. "We were wrong. Not just at Thanksgiving, for a long time." The words sounded heavy coming out of him, as if each one had a weight he was not used to carrying. My mother stared at the floor as he spoke. I glanced at her and she murmured, "I should not have said what I said. I should not have let it happen." It was not a full apology. It was not even a good one. But it was the closest she had ever come, and it was enough to mark the shift. I nodded, letting the moment exist without rushing to make it comfortable for them. They needed to sit in it, feel it, understand it. And they did. The room remained still for several seconds, but for once, the silence did not suffocate me. It empowered me. I was not waiting for their approval or affection. I was observing their attempts to rebuild what they had torn apart. Later that evening, as I left the house, Ethan walked me out to my car. "They are scared of losing you," he said. I breathed in the cold winter air. "They already did," I said. "Now they are trying to learn who I am when I stop being the version they built." Ethan nodded and kicked a bit of snow near the driveway. "You know," he said, "I used to think you were fragile. I used to think they were right about you being dramatic or sensitive." I exhaled a small laugh. "And now?" He looked at me with quiet conviction. "Now I think you are the strongest one in this family. Maybe the only strong one we ever had." It did not fill me with pride as much as clarity. Power had shifted. Not violently, not loudly, but unmistakably. I no longer needed to fight for a place in the family. I had created my own space separate from their approval and stronger than their criticism. They were no longer standing above me. They were learning slowly and uncomfortably how to meet me at eye level. The shift in power had changed the air around my family, but it had also changed something inside me. I no longer moved through life waiting for their approval or fearing their reactions. I was finally standing on ground I had built myself, and for a while that felt like enough. But life has a way of revealing the truth only after you are strong enough to handle it. The truth about my college years arrived on an ordinary Thursday afternoon. I was sitting across from Miriam in her office, signing the final version of Ethan's revised payment schedule. The mood was calm, almost routine. Papers shuffled, pens clicked, a heater hummed near the window. When we finished, Miriam leaned back in her chair and tapped the edge of a thick binder she had pulled out earlier. "This is something you might want to see," she said. I frowned. "What is it, old family financial documents? I requested them when we first started dealing with the foreclosure. You said your parents handled your college fund years ago, but some numbers didn't match the story you told me." My breath tightened slightly. "What do you mean?" She opened the binder to a set of printed statements. They were from a 5 and 29 college savings plan, one my grandparents had created for me when I was a child. I remembered hearing about that fund. I remembered being told it wasn't enough. Miriam pointed to a line on the first page. "The account had $42,000 in it the year before you graduated high school." My heart lurched. That could have covered most of my tuition at the state school I wanted. But I never went there. I went to community college while working 2 jobs, scraping by, exhausted and embarrassed. Miriam continued. "But 2 months before you enrolled, the account was emptied, completely. Not transferred to another education plan, not rolled into another account. Just Withdrawn. I stared at the paper, the numbers blurring for a moment. Who withdrew it? Miriam flipped to the next page and tapped a signature line. Your father. A single signature. Familiar. Looped in the places where his handwriting always looped. Hard where it should have been gentle. Cold where it should have been proud. I felt my pulse slow, as if my body were trying to buffer the blow. Why would he? My voice trailed off. I already knew the answer before Miriam said it. The withdrawal occurred the same month Ethan opened his first business. The same business that collapsed less than a year later. The same business that left him drowning in debt. The same debt I had rescued him from with the house years later. The room tilted slightly. I pressed my palm to my forehead. So they let me believe there was no money for college, I whispered. Miriam nodded gently. They used your college fund to finance Ethan's business and then told you the account was too small to help you. The memory hit like a fist. My mother telling me we can only afford community college, my father saying we all make sacrifices, Ethan grinning when he talked about his business idea, how everyone believed in him. Except everyone had included me. My future. My opportunities. My exhaustion during those years suddenly made sense. The long shifts at the diner. The nights doing homework on short breaks. The ache in my back from standing too long. The shame of watching friends go to real universities while I told myself community college was fine. Miriam watched my expression shift. Are you all right? I let out a shaky breath. I don't think all right is the word. It was betrayal, but not the loud dramatic kind. It was quieter, more corrosive. A decision made behind closed doors, hidden behind parental authority, designed to keep me in a place where I could never rise high enough to threaten their golden boy. And the worst part was how easily I had believed them. I had trusted their version of reality because I never imagined my own family would sabotage my future to fund my brother's dreams. I whispered, they took my chance so he could have one. Miriam nodded. And they never told you. They let you struggle believing it was your fault, your circumstance, your limitations. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. Why would parents do that to their own child? Miriam paused before answering. Some families build their identity around one child's success, and they sacrifice the others to maintain that illusion. It was not a legal answer. It was a human one, and it hurt in a way the plate at Thanksgiving never could. I sat back in the chair, the documents heavy in my lap. For a long moment, I said nothing. Then, very quietly, I asked, what can I do? Legally, nothing. Emotionally, everything. She closed the binder and placed her hand over mine. You know the truth now, and that gives you power they never expected you to have. Driving home that evening, the world looked different. Not darker, clearer. Every struggle I had endured, every dismissal, every moment I felt like I was falling behind. It wasn't because I was weak. It was because they held me down, deliberately. And suddenly, the shift in power that had begun at Christmas felt far from over. It felt like it was only beginning. In the weeks after discovering the truth about my college fund, something inside me settled into a strange combination of grief and clarity. I was not falling apart. I was not spinning in confusion. Instead, for the first time in my life, I was looking at my family without the haze of hope that had clouded my vision for years. The truth had stripped everything down to the beams. And what I saw was not pretty, but it was real. That honesty alone felt like healing. I started therapy again this time, not because I felt broken, but because I wanted to rebuild intentionally. My therapist, a calm woman named Dr. Keller, listened quietly as I explained what had happened with Thanksgiving. The house, the college fund, the shifting family dynamic. When I finished, she leaned back and asked a simple question that stunned me. What do you want your life to look like now that you are no longer living inside their version of you? I stared at her for a long moment. No one had ever asked me that. Not my parents, not Ethan, not even myself. I had always lived reactively shaping myself around the demands and dismissals of others. Now, the possibility of designing my own life felt terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. We spent weeks unraveling the invisible rules I had followed all my life. Rules like keep the peace, even when it destroys you, or your worth is measured by how helpful you are, or if they are unhappy, it must be your fault. Saying them out loud made them sound absurd, but living under them had shaped every major decision I ever made. Dr. Keller helped me replace those rules with new ones. Boundaries are not punishments. Distance is not cruelty. Self-respect is not selfish. It felt like learning a new language after being fluent only in survival. Meanwhile, life outside the therapy office shifted with an almost gentle tilt. I began waking up without dread. The heaviness that had lived in my chest for years faded into something lighter, something closer to relief. I started cooking again, not rushed weekday meals, but recipes I had once loved. I began reading books that had been sitting on my shelves untouched. I reclaimed pieces of myself I had lost because I was too busy managing the emotional disasters of my family. One morning, after a long session with Dr. Keller, I drove north toward Michigan without planning to. The highway stretched into a landscape of empty winter trees and wide skies. The world looked quiet, open, honest. I realized how desperately I needed that. By afternoon, I found myself standing in front of a small lakeside cabin that was for sale. It had peeling paint, a slanted porch, and a wood stove that smelled like old stories and warmth. It was imperfect. It was mine the moment I saw it. I called the realtor before I even stepped back into my car. 2 weeks later, the cabin belonged to me. Not because I needed to escape, but because I wanted a life that was not defined by my family's expectations. I spent weekends driving there with boxes of books, blankets, and secondhand furniture. Each trip felt like I was building a life brick by brick, boundary by boundary. It became my sanctuary long before I finished unpacking. In the middle of this new beginning, Ethan kept his word. Every payment arrived on time. He messaged occasionally, not out of obligation, but out of effort, asking how I was offering updates on the kids or simply checking in. There was no entitlement, no manipulation, just consistency. It was unfamiliar, but it was welcome. My parents, on the other hand, struggled. Their texts shifted from polite to emotional to confused, as if they were trying every old tactic to pull me back into the role I had always played. When none of it worked, the messages became something they had never given me before. Honest. Rachel, we don't know how to talk to you now. Rachel, we know we hurt you. Rachel, we want to understand but don't know where to start. I did not rush to respond. Healing did not mean returning to old patterns. It meant creating new ones. Eventually, I sent a single text. We can rebuild, but only slowly and only with honesty. They agreed. It was a beginning, not a resolution. But beginnings are more powerful when they are chosen. One evening at the cabin, as snow fell softly outside the window, I sat by the wood stove with a cup of tea and realized something that made my throat tighten. This was the first time in my life I felt genuinely safe. Safe from judgment. Safe from expectations. Safe from being stepped on. Safe to exist as myself. I thought about all the years I had spent contorting myself into smallness so that others could feel tall. I thought about the plate hitting my head, the words, "You're just help," the laughter around the table as I lay on the floor. And then I thought about the silence afterward, the silence I had used not to hide but to rebuild. Healing was not dramatic. It was not cinematic. It was steady, patient, rooted. It was choosing myself in 100 small ways. It was letting my life expand without waiting for permission. It was learning I deserved gentleness even from myself. And maybe most importantly, it was understanding that distance from people who hurt you is not abandonment. Sometimes it is the first act of love you ever show yourself. I never expected my life to split into a before and after. Yet now I can see the dividing line as clearly as if someone carved it into the wood of that Thanksgiving table. Before was a world shaped by other people's expectations, rules that were never spoken but always enforced a lifetime of shrinking myself so the family story could stay intact. After was the moment a plate shattered against my head and everything I had been taught about loyalty and love cracked with it. People think breaking points come suddenly, but the truth is that mine had been building for years. Every ignored cry for help, every chore handed to me instead of Ethan, Every insult dressed as family humor, every dismissed accomplishment every time I tried to stand tall only to be told I was making a scene. The plate was not the beginning of the problem. It was the evidence, the proof I could no longer deny. Lying on that wooden floor, hearing my mother say, "You're just help," realizing no one would stand up for me, I understood something I had spent years trying not to see. Love without respect is not love. Family without safety is not family. I spent so much of my life thinking if I just worked harder, stayed quieter, forgave quicker, or proved myself more, things would change. They didn't, because I was trying to fix a wound I didn't cause. It wasn't until I finally stepped away that healing began. It wasn't until I demanded accountability that truth surfaced. It wasn't until I said no more that their behavior changed. Not because they suddenly became better people, but because they realized they could no longer rely on the version of me who tolerated everything. Power doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it arrives with boundaries. Sometimes it arrives with silence. Sometimes it arrives when you walk away from a table where you were never served anything but pain. People often ask what justice looks like in a family. Is it revenge? Is it forcing someone to feel what they made you feel? Is it cutting ties forever? The truth is more complicated. Justice for me was seeing the truth clearly for the first time. It was Ethan standing in front of our entire family and saying he hurt me, he lied, he believed I deserved it because of the way he was raised. It was my parents for the first time in their lives looking at me without the shield of superiority and realizing the foundation of our family story was built on my silence. It was uncovering the truth about my college fund and knowing that my struggles were not failures. They were engineered limitations, and justice was refusing to let those limitations define me anymore. It was buying that cabin in Michigan and giving myself the peace they never gave me. It was choosing therapy, choosing boundaries, choosing a life that wasn't shaped by their expectations. But the greatest justice of all was this revelation. I was never the help. I was the one holding everything together. And when I stopped, the entire system fell apart long enough for everyone to see it. That is when change finally became possible. Not guaranteed, not perfect, but possible. I learned that you cannot force people to respect you, but you can refuse to stay anywhere you are disrespected. You cannot make people love you the right way, but you can stop accepting the wrong kind of love, and you cannot rewrite your past, but you can build a future that is not written by the people who broke you. As I sit here now in my cabin watching snow fall over the lake, I no longer feel the weight of proving myself. I no longer feel the ache of being unseen. I no longer feel like an accessory in someone else's story. This is my life, my voice, my place. The night my brother smashed a plate into my head, I learned a lesson I will carry for the rest of my life. Love isn't silence. Family isn't ownership. And survival isn't the same as belonging. I chose myself. And that choice saved me. Now I want to speak to you directly. Maybe you've been the quiet one in your family. Maybe you've carried burdens no one thanked you for. Maybe you've swallowed insults because it felt easier than fighting. Maybe you've been told you're dramatic when you were simply hurting. Maybe you have spent your whole life being useful instead of being loved. I want you to hear this. You deserve better. You deserve respect. You deserve safety. You deserve to take up space. You deserve to stop making yourself small to keep the peace. And you deserve to walk away from anyone who treats you like you exist only to serve them. You're not the help. You're the one holding everything together, and it is time the world sees it. If you've ever had a moment where your family made you feel small, invisible, or dismissed, share your story in the comments. Someone out there might need to hear it. Tell me where you are watching from and tell me what part of this story hit home for you. I read every single one.